Hi, I'm Jeff Kazerman, Vice President of Government Relations at the New Jersey Society of CPAs. And thank you for joining us for this special edition of Issues Watch Live. I'm joined today by Mike Affuso. He is the Executive Vice President and Director of Government Relations at the New Jersey Bankers Association. Thank you so much for joining us, Mike.
Glad to be here.
Okay. I guess we had a little delay there due to this video technology. As I'm sure everyone knows, the Paycheck Protection Program, which everybody really knows as PPP, it's been in extremely high demand. In fact, the demand has been overwhelming, and the first round of money, $349 billion, ran out in 13 or 14 days. Fortunately, Congress approved the second round of funding to the tune of $315 billion. But that money, too, is not expected to last very long. In our previous broadcast, we talked with CPAs and the SBA's New Jersey District Director about the PPP. Everybody's been knocking the banks over the problems with the program. But I don't think there's been much attention paid, if any, to the bankers' side of the story. So today, we're going to look at it from the bankers' perspective. Now, if you have any questions, and I'm referring to the audience here, you can enter them in the comments field, and we will try to address them during the broadcast. So now I'm going to talk to Mike. Mike, for the first round of funding, do you have any idea how many loans were given to New Jersey businesses, and what was the total dollar amount?
Sure. So, and thank you for having me. We really appreciate it. And, for the folks that are members of the New Jersey Society of CPAs, you couldn't be served better in Trenton by your group. Your folks are everywhere. I'm in Trenton a lot. Your folks are everywhere on all the different important issues that face you. I just want to say I couldn't be more pleased to be here, and you couldn't be better served by them. But to answer your question, the PPP in New Jersey in round one, there were 33,519 loans that were approved in that process. And that's $9.5 billion in funding. Now, if you took the population of the United States and you determined that New Jersey is approximately 2.7 or 2.8% of the population, and you took that 2.8 and you multiplied it by the 349 billion, you would realize that we're at about 99% of our fair share when you look at the population. I know there was some consternation about the number of loans that were filled, but let's understand really the purpose of the program. The purpose of the program is to get money onto the street in the hands of workers and employees so that they could buy what it is that they need and to prevent unemployment. So the more money is really the barometer of success. And, just to drill down a little bit further on that, it takes approximately 20 minutes to process a loan request. If you process a loan request for a business that has 5 people, or you process a loan request for a business that has 50 people, you're generally going to have the same amount of time, but you're going to serve 10 times as many of the population. So I don't think the amount of loans is really indicative to whether the program was successful. I think you have to look at the pro rata share coming back.
Right. And it's funny because we've had lots of members who have said New Jersey is, not getting its fair share. We always get the short end of the stick. We don't get as much money back from the federal government as we give. So it's good to know that that actually is not true for this program, at least. So do you have any idea what percentage of those who applied for the PPP in New Jersey actually received money, were able to get a loan?
All right. Now this is a little less scientific, but based on our survey of our member banks that are community banks, when the program ended, there were 50,000 outstanding loans, right? So we did 33. There was 50,000 outstanding, but the 33,000 also included the larger institutions that we represent, like J.P. Morgan Chase, Bank of America, et cetera. So if you take my number and you say, well, there's 50,000 outstanding, we did 33,000, and my 50,000 does not include the large institutions, I would say that there are twice as many. I think you could make a good argument saying there are twice as many outstanding loans as there were completed loans.
Okay, and that was the first round, or
that's the first round.
Okay.
So now, go ahead.
No, you go.
So now the question to me is, all right, you have twice as many people waiting in the queue, waiting for this funding of the second round. And how do you negotiate that? And, the rollout of the second round was also a bit clunky on the SBA side. And I know the banks are getting to the lenders or getting to the borrowers as quickly as they possibly can. But our survey, as I said, 50,000 people, 50,000 borrowers outstanding, 5.7 billion in loans outstanding. So, those are big numbers. And that does not include people that haven't gotten into the queue and were still waiting for banking services.
Yeah, so that sort of gets into the next mathematical question. I'm really drilling you here on these questions from, well, not quite calculus, but maybe ninth grade, where you had to do a lot of percentages and algebra. What, if you know, what percentage applied? What, in other words, they got into the application process, but they were not able to get a loan. So they went in, they got through, and for whatever reason, the bank or SBA said, no, sorry, we can't do that for whatever reason.
Well, I think there are two pieces. When you say applied, do you mean people that were accepted but in the queue and not funded? Or do you mean people that said you're not eligible for this program?
The first one, where they got in the queue, but were not approved.
So go back to the original numbers. 33,000 got it. 50,000 are waiting, but that 50,000 is a low number because it doesn't include the larger institutions. So if you take the 50,000 and just to make my life easy and throw another 17,000 on top of that, that's 67,000. So 33 and 67 is 100,000. 33,000 were approved. That means a third were approved.
Oh, okay. All right.
And that's extrapolating what the larger institutions might be doing that is not showing up in that 50,000 number.
And why don't the larger banks show up in the numbers?
Because they can't drill down to New Jersey like my community banks can. Because again, I'm asking this on a spreadsheet. It's not a real scientific, perfect way to do it.
Right. Okay. So let's look at the second round of funding, which in its first day, I believe the whole system crashed. Outside of that, how has it been going so far? Have there been any significant changes comparing this round to the first round?
Well, I think so. Here's what happened in the first round. There are really two types of banks. There are banks that did business with SBA and banks that didn't do business with SBA. For the ones that didn't do business with SBA, SBA was going to allow them to do business with them, particularly for this program. However, those banks had to develop connectivity with SBA, and that connectivity was very difficult to establish. So getting off the ground, if you banked at a bank that did not do business with SBA and you were trying to get a loan through them, you were waiting because SBA and that bank had to have connectivity.
Okay.
That problem is largely solved for round two. However, what you now have, though, is a line of at least 50,000 people waiting for loans already in the queue. So what SBA did in the beginning was they allowed for institutions to submit 15,000 loans all at once at one time. So you got one slug to go in. And then they lowered the 15,000 to 5,000. I just think that SBA was not prepared to do something like this.
Right. Now, I think everybody agrees that the system, of course, I may be wrong, and you can correct me, but the whole program started too soon, and that maybe it would have been better if they waited a few weeks or whatever to work out the kinks before they launched it. Does that make sense, or did the legislation require them to start doing the program on by that date that they started?
Well, I think the issue really is a political question. I mean, it's tough. It's tough for the Congress to say, "Hey, folks, we know you're not working. We have a program that's going to help you, but we got to give the bureaucracy 2-3 weeks to get their act together."
Okay.
You really can't. It's not. No congressman would be willing to allow for that, right? Wherever you stand on the spectrum. The Congress voted for $2.3 trillion. In one vote, they expanded the an individual taxpayer's portion of the national debt by $16,000 by this $2.3 trillion.
Right.
So they certainly want that money out on the street as quickly as possible.
Right.
And I think you had elevated expectations on that were raised by federally elected officials that this money was just going to roll out the door. And you might notice that government is not the most efficient distribution system sometimes.
Oh, really? I never noticed that. Can you give us a post-mortem on the PPP so far? Like what worked, what went wrong, and how it should be done in the future, if they find money for round 3 or round 4? I mean, what are your personal views on that?
Well, I think the first problem was the connectivity in the beginning. So you had a bunch of people that banked at banks that were wanted to help them, and they were not connected with the SBA. So there was that level of consternation of the banker is trying to do what they're trying to do and get connected with SBA, and their customer is saying, what's going on here? What's the problem? The president says this is fine. Why are you dropping the ball for me?
Yeah.
So I think that was really an issue. But again, if you look back at the numbers and you realize that we basically got what we had coming to us, I think we did a pretty good job on it. The other thing, I mean, realistically, like, look at me, I'm in my kitchen. How many people were doing this out of their kitchen? It's less than perfect. It's a less than perfect situation, where if you were rolling out a program and it wasn't a contagion, it was something else, that you could put a bunch of people in a room and just say, hey, bang it out. And we're going to work here until it's over with. And we're going to order breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You're dealing with people and they have, bandwidth issues, legitimate bandwidth issues, and they have to deal with their own children and all of these different pieces. So, I still go back to the fact that we're almost 100% funded, and I feel pretty good about it. The question to me really boils down to, it's great that we hit our number, but other states were not as affected by COVID, and they hit their number too. And is that really, we got our pro rata fair share. But was it really necessary for some of the states in the Midwest to get their quote unquote pro rata fair share? But I'll leave that for others. I mean, quite honestly, I'm just trying to work with my members to make sure we are answering every call that we can answer.
Right. I think I heard you once say that you've been dealing with about 50 phone calls a day.
Personally.
Yeah, personally. We have a question that just came in. And here's the question. I have a few clients who applied day one through a very large bank who have not heard anything yet, but lots of clients who applied through smaller banks as late as last week have been approved. Can you comment on why that may be, small versus large institutions?
It's a tough question because I really don't know the answer to that. I know people are trying to read some nefarious activity into it, and I don't really see that. I just think large institutions have a large amount of clients, which gets them overwhelmed in a situation like this. I just think that nobody was really prepared to deal with this issue. And some of the smaller institutions at the end of the day have a discrete amount of clients. And once they're able to serve their discrete amount of clients, their queue is gone or at least diminished to some extent.
Yeah, actually, it just occurred to me that I heard somewhere the same thing, that relatively speaking, the number of applicants for the large banks was much higher than the smaller community banks, taking into account that the smaller banks could take only less numbers of people and the bigger banks could take more. But when you even things out and make it relative to their size, so that makes sense. What do you see? This may help our members and business people. What do you see as the most common problems and misunderstandings that applicants have, and what advice would you give to businesses that want to apply?
All right. The first thing that I would tell people is go to your bank. And I know that causes some consternation because if you feel like you're stuck at your bank, where do you go from there? But if you go to a different bank, the application process becomes more cumbersome. So that's why I'm advising that. As far as where I've seen difficulties, smaller businesses tend to not have the most precise accounting compared to some of the larger small businesses. So, your small business with 4 employees, their accounting practices may be a little more imprecise than a small business with 75 employees. And I think the professionals are even overwhelmed in that case, where you have a larger small business can work with their accountant and work with their banker and provide the precise detail. Some of the smaller ones, I think, were struggling to provide the level of detail that was necessary.
So they need to hire a good CPA so all their books are in order and they have all of that ready to go. But, I know what you mean because, I know the owners of a few small businesses, like what you were saying, 4 or 5 employees. One is an ice cream shop, and their accounting, which is, the day-to-day is done by the owner, who typically doesn't have any background in accounting, and it's just a mess. So I'm sure the banks had to do their due diligence to try and get more precise information out of them. So I could definitely see that as a problem, and they all need to hire a good CPA. Okay, so let's look ahead for a moment. Do you think that there's going to be another round of funding for PPP? And if so, any idea the dollar amount or changes to how the program works? And I know you don't have a crystal ball.
Look, if you just look at the numbers that I gave you before, if we did 1/3 of the hunger, if we satiated 1/3 with the first slug, the second slug is about the same size, a little bit smaller. So we assume that that's going to satiate another third if we do our job and we get our fair share. That means there's still a third left out in the cold. But I think the countervailing force to this is these are big, big numbers. And eventually, I think you're going to see budget hawks in the Congress say, okay, how much more money are we going to spend on this?
Right.
And I think there's an argument to be made that, this is not necessarily benefiting every person that it could benefit, and might be potentially benefiting people that need not benefit. For example, while New Jersey bankers, as we're organized as a corporate entity, would not be eligible for it, if we were organized in a different way as a corporate entity, we would be. Everyone here is working, and we are affected by COVID, but it would be a nice way for us to clean up our bottom line if we were able to get it. How many companies are there out there that are availing themselves to this for that reason? I don't know the answer to that. Certainly if you are a business that's been essentially put out of business by governmental action, clearly you should be entitled to this. But I think, you're going to have eventually a countervailing force, because essentially they're flying overhead with a 747 shoveling money out the back of it, not caring where it lands.
I like that.
And it will have stimulative effect. I get that. But, look, first piece, $16,000 per person. Next piece, probably another $4,000. Somebody's going to say, wait a second, we just increased the national debt by $20,000 a person to do this. That's or per taxpayer. That becomes a big number. So, do I think the need will be there. What I really think needs to happen, though, and I think this is where the real tragedy and the failure of government may rear its head, is if you assume that, the first day of PPP was April 20th, that a business was getting it, and they need to maintain their payrolls through, let's say, June 15th. If that business is not able to be stood up by June 15th, and they can't maintain that payroll, they're going to owe that money back to the government. And in my opinion, what we need to do is ensure that these businesses that are affected have money and have a very low interest loan from the SBA to stand up. And, I know a lot of businesses operate as people operate, pretty much paycheck to paycheck. So maybe what the SBA should be looking at is a loan program that looks at, what last year's revenue was, and give you 2 months of revenue at 30 years at 1%, and, give people stand-up money to at least get started. And it's also subject to the governor reopening the state. I mean, imagine the quandary that a business owner has, and they say, wait a second, one government says I can't open, and the other government is saying, because I can't keep my people on payroll, because I can't open, I owe them a bunch of money. I mean, it's a heck of a quandary to be in.
Right. Well, you actually answered my next question, which is how you would fix the PPP process if there is a round 3, or did I miss something? You have any?
I just think we have to think beyond PPP. I think we have to target, we have to, if there's going to be a round 3 of PPP, it has to be tied through the date of opening. And somebody has to just declare when the date of opening is going to be and get these folks up and through the date of opening.
Right.
And if restaurants aren't going to open for a while, you got to extend PPP for restaurants. You can't just do this helicopter cash money. You have to do it a little more targeted.
Right. That makes total sense. So how are the banks gearing up to deal with the PPP loan forgiveness and repayment? Our members have had a lot of questions about calculating loan forgiveness, and I don't know if that's something, that kind of detail is something you're familiar with. But if you are, what do you think?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I'm not familiar with the detail, but if I were to ask a banker right now, they're concerned with getting the money out the door and taking care of their customers. I do think on the loan forgiveness side, based upon the fact that we are affecting the national debt to such a degree that there will be a push from Treasury to attempt to disallow as much forgiveness as possible to recoup some of this money. I don't know that to be the case, but I think somewhere somebody's going to look at these and realize that these are big dollars.
Yeah.
But as far as on the ground at banks, I think they're just focusing on helping their customers right now with that's a fourth quarter question, and we're still playing in the
right. I like that metaphor also. So, and again, this may be something that you're not the expert on, but well, maybe you are. What is the banking community's biggest concern regarding loan forgiveness?
I think that there will be a lack of clarity in what the rules are, or the rules changing midway through, and the fact that they will be the ones that will be telling their customers that they did not get forgiveness because the customer understood the program to operate in one way, they acted based upon their understanding, and then there was some change in regulatory language.
Right.
The regulations on this thing are changing every day. I mean, it's
crazy. So
I mean, it's like that Apollo movie. They're just doing it with duct tape and glue, and let's figure out what we have and how we're going to do it.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we have to get through it. And it's easy to complain while it's going on. Would I have done it differently? Absolutely. But, we're in the fog of war right now. And, it's very easy to criticize all different types of decisions and Monday morning quarterback what you would have done and what you could have done. We're talking about big dollars, and we're talking about a situation where, people were falling off a cliff. So, it's a political question.
Right.
It's a political, at the end of the day, if you look at the COVID cases in certain states, does it make sense that all this money could drop into those states? No. But you know what? Those states have 2 senators too.
Yeah.
And that's the reality of it.
Yeah. Actually, and obviously I'm not a banker and I'm not a CPA. I was kind of shocked that that they had any kind of program ready to go of this kind of enormity. Whatever it was, the bill was signed by the president, and a couple of days later it began, right? I mean, I was like, how did they ever put that together so quickly? So are there any other types of loans or federal or state programs that small businesses should be looking into?
Well, through the SBA and through this new round of funding, There are economic disaster loans that you could get directly through the SBA, but it's pretty much closed out. Treasury is also doing a Main Street loan program, but those are big dollars generally, and that's still being discussed, where the industries are commenting on how that should be precisely rolled out. And then, as you know, the EDA programs in New Jersey were oversubscribed almost instantaneously.
Right.
There's so much need out there. It just, right now, the PPP is the only show in town.
Yeah.
I have yet to hear of someone getting an economic disaster loan in round 2, even though $60 billion was appropriated for it.
Oh, that, you mean the what do they call that? The EIDs? Yeah, right.
Yes.
So after round 2 of PPP loans are over and $700 billion has been given out to small businesses. Now I'm going to ask you to be an economist here. So that's $700 billion to X number of businesses. Is this enough to really get, small businesses through the coronavirus so that they can be profitable, or at least not losing money in 6 months or a year? Or, are we really talking about trillions needed to do that sort of thing? And you're not an economist, so, you can just give me your views on that. But we won't come back in 6 months and harass you if it doesn't turn out to be right.
Honestly, I don't think it has as much to do with economics as it has to do with science.
Okay.
If this vaccine that moved the stock market this week, or not vaccine, but if this treatment that moved the stock market last week actually turns out to be a viable treatment, and if they can get a viable vaccine, then you're going to have less social distancing. I just don't understand if the idea is going to be that we're going to open up businesses and allow them to operate at 50% capacity for people, how those businesses are going to be able to become viable, right? Because if you think about it, if the clamor for PPP is because businesses are essentially living paycheck to paycheck, how is it possible that if occupancy of a hotel or of a restaurant or a bar gets shrunk by 50%, for somebody that's operating paycheck to paycheck as a business owner, how is it possible that those businesses are going to be able to stand up? I just don't see it. I think it's going to be science is going to drive the economics. I really believe that.
I've been wondering the same thing. I've been reading for a while. Well, maybe in the middle of the summer, maybe a little earlier, maybe a little later, we're going to let restaurants open, and everybody has to be at least 6 feet apart, and they'll be limiting the number of people coming in. And I'm thinking to myself, well, a lot of these restaurants have a hard time even when they can let in as many people as they want and they're crowded. So how in the world are they going to make money with 1/3 of their usual customer base? So I totally agree with you, and I'm not an economist or a CPA, but I've been shaking my head a lot since this whole thing began and saying to myself, well, is this really going to do it? This is, I don't know. I've been thinking a lot of businesses are not going to get through this, at least the smaller businesses. So if you were an enlightened dictator, you can do whatever you want. And of course, since you're enlightened, you're looking out for the best in the public interest. What steps would you take now to help small businesses? What would you do to help them get through this crisis and then, get up and standing on their feet again? And I do realize that since you're aware of the political realities, there may not be trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars on this for this, but you are an enlightened dictator, so you can ask for somewhat more money if you have to.
Didn't Shakespeare say, kill all the lawyers? That's the first thing that he would do if he was an enlightened dictator. And I'm a lawyer. No, I think, look, this is a problem that you're going to have to throw money at,
Right.
but you're going to have to look at the science also and see how the science is developing. And I think, I believe the market is going to dictate for certain venues whether they're going to be successful or not. I absolutely love the New York Jets. If somebody gave me for free season tickets, 50-yard line, lower tier, I would not go to a Jet game until I knew there was something that would be preventative for me. I would not go to an 80,000 person stadium.
Right.
And I'm not the type of person to be afraid of a lot of things. But if you have folks like me saying, you know what, it's not really worth my aggravation, I'll watch it on TV, I think you're going to see a lot of folks like that. Yeah. So I really think that science is going to drive this. And, yes, we need to throw money at it. One of the things that I would do if I was an enlightened dictator is have independent contractors paying into the unemployment fund. So that if something like this happens again, and I'm sure it will, unfortunately, in our lifetime, that you have as many people paying into the Commonwealth, and then they could draw from the Commonwealth. Right now, you have a situation where now independent contractors will be able to draw from the unemployment fund, but I think it should be structured better, and I think some of these government programs should be retooled in ways that reflect the way the economy is working and the way the economy is going to work in the future. So I would look at that. And then as far as money goes, look, we could keep throwing money at it, and maybe that's what we need to do to get through a critical phase. But we also have to look at what this means in the scope of the national economy, the national debt, et cetera. I mean, we're gonna be at debt to GDP ratios that are higher than during World War II. So there's only so much that this can continue to go on. And I'm not saying we need to stop immediately, but we need to there needs to be a hard decision, and maybe the hard decision is not going to be until 2021, but eventually some hard decisions are going to have to be made.
Right. So do you have any closing advice to small businesses to help them survive this crisis? Anything you would tell them?
So first, on the PPP, if you're in the queue, I would say be patient. You're going to have a competitor, a compatriot that's going to say, I went to this bank and it went faster. You're just not going to know where you are in line currently and where you're going to be in line at the next place. I have not advised a person, and as I said, I was taking 50 phone calls a day for about the past month. I have not advised somebody to get out of line if they're in the queue, because it would be a heck of a thing if you went from number 2 to number 2,000 if you got out of line, and there's no way of knowing that. Right, so I'm advising folks of that. I'm advising folks, if you have not applied for the PPP, to go to your bank and apply at your bank. That's the other piece of it. And finally, before you do that, make sure you do have, your accounting in order, because that's going to become problematic during the application process. Okay. Beyond the PPP, I urge patience for people, but I also know that people need to eat, and you can't eat patience. I do think there'll be additional government action. I think additional government action is necessary. I would just kind of like to see what that looks like in the future, and we'll go from there. I mean, I could tell you this, across the spectrum, the elected officials that I've dealt with are all grappling with how to deal with this issue. They all care about their constituents. They care about the state. They care about the country. It's so unprecedented, though, that you know, there's a lot of folks, just as business owners are at their wits' end, policymakers are also at their wits' end. And, you know, you have a whole, if you look at what's going on in the country right now and you look at what's going on in the world right now, as far as responses go, there are so many different choices of how to respond to this as a public policy leader. And, you know, you just don't know the answer. You know, some people are touting what's going on in Sweden. Others are saying it's not a good idea. And, you know, all these folks are operating based upon imperfect information. Yeah. And they're trying to arrive at the best conclusion that they can based upon imperfect information and based upon the fact that there is no vaccine. And right now, you can't just get a shot and cure it. So it's an extraordinarily difficult situation. You know, it's not something like a war, you know, that you could ramp up production and fight a battle and win the battle. You know, we need to figure out how to win the battle first.
Yeah, I don't think I think everybody is suffering. There are no winners in this game, except, I don't know, maybe there's a few manufacturers who make masks and gloves who are doing okay, but that would be about it. So that just about wraps it up for this broadcast. Mike, we thank you so much for joining us today. You provided a lot of insights that I think very few people are aware of, including myself. So, you know, thank you very much for joining us today.
Jeff, I'm glad to be here. And, you know, I think, you know, at the end of the day, we have to remember who it is that we are. You know, we are a great people. You know, we rise to our challenges. You know, we're the ones that said we're going to put a man on the moon. We're the ones that said we're going to do D-Day. We're a great nation, and we'll get through this. I have no doubt about it. And it's you know, sometimes you have to face the darkness and you have to face the struggle. But if you think about what other generations have fought through, you know, that's who we are. And I think we will look back on this someday and we will be the better for it.
Oh, okay. Well, that's definitely a positive note. I'm waiting for that day, Mike. I hope it doesn't come to after I'm dead. But anyway, to our members, we thank all of you for joining us today. I'm sure you found this helpful and informative. We will continue to post updates on our website and social media, as well as our open forum, which is on our Connect site, which is on our website. If you missed our last broadcast with the New Jersey director of the SBA, you can watch that at njcpa.org/coronavirus. Also, plan to join us for our next broadcast on Monday, May 4th at 12:30 in the afternoon. We'll be talking about student loan debt relief measures at both the federal and New Jersey levels that have been implemented because of the coronavirus pandemic. Learn more about this program and other COVID-19 related business and tax news at njcpa.org/coronavirus. So everybody, hope you have a great day, and please stay safe and healthy.